The crystal towers of Prime burned against the dark sky. Captain stood on the palace balcony and watched enemy ships fill the air like angry wasps. Red laser beams cut through the night, turning the beautiful city into a war zone. Empress moved beside him, her pale blue skin almost glowing in the firelight. Her large silver wings folded tight against her back as she watched her world die. They looked like giant moths crossed with angels, but right now the Empress looked very human in her fear and sadness. "The outer walls have fallen," reported General Vex through his communication device. His voice shook with panic. "The forces are breaking through the main gates. We have maybe 20 minutes before they reach the palace." Checked his plasma rifle and counted his ammunition packs. Not enough. Not nearly enough for what was coming. They were like walking nightmares, 8 feet tall with black armor that covered their insect bodies. They had been eating their way across the galaxy for decades, and they never showed mercy. "Your Majesty," General Vex said, appearing in person this time, "the escape ships are ready. We must leave now while we still can." The Empress looked around the throne room. Her ancestors had ruled from this place for 1,000 years. Golden light came through the crystal windows, making rainbow patterns on the white marble floors. It was the most beautiful place had ever seen. "I will not abandon my people," said firmly. "Majesty, your people are already gone," another officer said. "The civilians evacuated hours ago. Only soldiers remain, and we cannot hold this position. They have too many ships, too many warriors." Watch the alien officers talk. These were brave soldiers who had served the Empress for years, but he could see the fear in their large, dark eyes. They were a peaceful race. They solved problems with words and thoughts, not violence. Their minds could touch each other across great distances, sharing feelings and ideas. But they had no minds to touch, only hunger and rage. A loud crash echoed through the palace as something heavy hit the front doors. Then another crash and another. They were using a battering ram. "We have to go now," General Vex shouted. "They are almost inside." The first officer to break was Captain. He had served the royal family for 15 years, but when the war cries of the echoed down the halls, something snapped inside him. His wings spread wide and he ran toward the back exit. "Hold your position," the Empress ordered, but was already gone. Then another officer followed him, and another. Soon the whole room was filled with the sound of beating wings as the guards fled toward the escape ships. General Vex grabbed the Empress by her arm. "Majesty, please, we cannot protect you here." Pulled her arm free. "I gave my word to defend this world. I will not run like a coward." "Then you will die like a fool," Vex said, then immediately looked sorry for his harsh words. "Forgive me, Majesty, but this is not about courage. This is about survival. They will torture you if they capture you alive. They will make your death a celebration for their army." The front doors exploded inward with a sound like thunder. Black smoke poured into the throne room, and through it came the red glow of energy weapons. Their war cries filled the air, a sound like metal being torn apart mixed with animal screams. General Vex spread his wings. "I am sorry, my Empress. I cannot watch you die for nothing." He flew away through the back exit, following his soldiers. Stood alone with the Empress in the empty throne room. He could hear the heavy footsteps of warriors getting closer. Their voices echoed off the crystal walls as they searched room by room, killing anything that moved. "Why do you stay?" asked quietly. "Even my own people have left me." Thought about the question. 6 months ago, he had been nothing, a disgraced soldier with no purpose and no hope. The Empress had given him a chance when no one else would. She had seen something good in him when he could not see it himself. "You gave me my honor back, Majesty," he said, moving to stand between the throne and the main entrance. "Some debts cannot be paid with money. You could leave with the others. I would not think less of you." "I would think less of me," replied. He activated his rifle's targeting system and counted the doorways the enemy would have to come through. Besides, someone needs to stay close to you. That is what bodyguards do." The Empress smiled sadly. "You humans are strange creatures. Your minds work differently than ours. When we touch your thoughts, we feel something we do not understand, a willingness to die for ideas that have no physical form." "Maybe that makes us crazy," said, "but it also makes us human." The war cries were getting louder now. Could see shadows moving in the smoke beyond the broken doors. He raised his rifle and took aim. "How many do you think are coming?" asked. "All of them," answered. "But they have to come through those doors to get to you. That means they can only attack a few at a time. I can make them pay for every step. And when your ammunition runs out." Pulled a combat knife from his belt. The metal blade gleamed in the crystal light. "Then we do this the old-fashioned way." The first warrior stepped through the doorway. It was huge, even bigger than had expected. Its black armor was covered in spikes, and green slime dripped from its mouth. 4 red eyes glowed with hate as it looked around the throne room. Pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt hit the creature's center mass and sent it crashing backward into its friends. The real fight was about to begin. "Stay behind the throne," told the Empress. "And whatever happens, do not give up. Sometimes the impossible just takes a little longer." 6 months before the fall of Prime, sat in a dirty bar on Station Omega 7. Empty bottles covered the table in front of him, and his hand shook slightly as he reached for another drink. The bar was full of mercenaries, smugglers, and other people who had nowhere else to go. Looked at himself in the mirror behind the bar. His Earth colonial marine uniform was gone, replaced by worn civilian clothes. The proud soldier who had once served with honor was now just another drunk looking for work that paid well and asked no questions. "You?" a voice asked behind him. Turned around slowly. A tall woman stood there, but she was not human. Her skin was pale blue, and silver wings were folded against her back. She wore simple clothes, but something about the way she stood told she was used to being obeyed. "Depends who is asking," said. His words came out a little thick from the alcohol. "My name is, I have a job offer for you." Laughed bitterly. "Lady, I do not know what you heard, but I am not the soldier you want. The Earth Colonial Marines threw me out 6 months ago. Dishonor discharge. I am damaged goods." Sat down across from him without being invited. "I know exactly what happened on Titan Colony. You refused to fire on civilian protesters. Your commanding officer ordered you to shoot unarmed people, and you said no." "That is right," said, "and it cost me everything. My rank, my career, my future. Turns out doing the right thing does not pay very well." "But you still did it," said quietly. "When faced with an immoral order, you chose to disobey, even knowing what it would cost you." Studied her face. "You are not just some random alien, are you? The way you talk, the way you sit, you are someone important." "I am Empress of the Empire," she said simply, "and I need someone like you." Almost choked on his drink. An Empress. What could an Empress possibly want with a washed-up human soldier? "I want someone who understands loyalty. Real loyalty, not just following orders." Explained her problem. The Empire was peaceful, built on trade and diplomacy. Her people were telepaths who could share thoughts and emotions. When they felt fear, everyone around them felt it too. When one soldier panicked, it spread through the whole army like a disease. "We face enemies who do not think like us," she said. "They are coming and they respect only strength. My people are brave, but their minds are connected. If one breaks, they all break." "So you want humans because we are too stupid to run away when we should?" asked. "No," said. "I want humans because you can choose to stay when others run. Your minds are separate from each other. You can be afraid and still fight. You can feel hopeless and still stand your ground." Looked at her for a long moment. "Why me specifically? There are lots of human mercenaries out there. Most of them have not been kicked out of their own army." Because you already proved you will do the right thing even when it destroys you, she said. I do not need someone who just follows orders. I need someone who will follow their conscience. 3 days later, found himself on the Empress's personal ship, traveling toward Prime. The other guards were polite but distant. They did not understand why their Empress had hired a disgraced human soldier. Did not understand it either at first. But as the weeks passed, he began to see what was trying to build. She was not just looking for bodyguards. She was trying to create something new, an army that could stand against enemies who fought with pure savagery. The Empress spent time talking with about duty and honor. She was nothing like the cold, distant rulers had served before. She actually cared about the people she led. She worried about her soldiers, grieved for civilians caught in wars, and sometimes stayed awake all night reading reports from refugee camps. Leadership is not about giving orders, she told one evening as they stood on the observation deck. It is about being worthy of the trust people place in you. Is that why you chose me? Asked. Because I understand trust. I chose you because you prove that some things matter more than personal success, she said. That is rare in this galaxy. The first real test came during a diplomatic mission to the system. The negotiations were going well until someone tried to assassinate the Empress. Saw the attacker's energy weapon charging and threw himself in front of without thinking. The disruptor blast hit in the chest and sent him crashing to the floor. Pain like lightning shot through his body as the weapon's energy tried to tear his cells apart. He could barely breathe, but he managed to draw his sidearm and put 3 shots into the assassin before losing consciousness. Woke up in the ship's medical bay 3 days later. The Empress sat beside his bed, reading reports on her data pad. When she saw his eyes open, she put the pad aside. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like someone tried to cook me from the inside out," said weakly. "Did we catch the rest of them?" "There were no others. It was just one fanatic who thought killing me would somehow bring peace to the galaxy," studied his face. "Why did you do it? You barely knew me then. I was just another alien ruler who hired you for protection." Thought about the question. Because you are worth saving, and someone needs to be willing to pay that price. Even if it costs you your life. "Especially then," said. "I lost my honor once by following bad orders. I will not lose it again by failing to protect someone who deserves protection." From that day forward, something changed between them. It was not romance. The differences between their species made that impossible. But it was a deep understanding and respect. The Empress saw in the kind of loyalty that could not be bought or forced. Saw in her the kind of leader who made loyalty worth giving. Over the following months became more than just a bodyguard. He helped train other soldiers, teaching them about human tactics and determination. He learned about culture and history. Most importantly, he found his purpose again. When the invasion finally began, was ready. Not just with weapons and tactics, but with something deeper. He had found a cause worth fighting for, and a person worth dying to protect. As he stood in that throne room with plasma fire lighting up the crystal walls, remembered every conversation, every shared moment of understanding. The Empress had given him back his honor. Now it was time to prove he deserved it. The first warrior charged through the doorway like a black hurricane, pulled the trigger of his plasma rifle, and the bright blue energy bolt hit the creature's center mass. The alien flew backward into the smoke, but 3 more took its place immediately. Rolled behind a marble pillar as energy blasts filled the air where he had been standing. The crystal walls exploded in showers of rainbow fragments as the weapons tore through everything in their path. "How many are out there?" Empress called from behind her throne. "Too many," answered, popping out to fire 3 quick shots. 2 hit their targets, sending more warriors crashing to the floor. "But they can only come through the doors a few at a time. That gives us a chance." The throne room had been built for beauty, not defense, but saw possibilities that the alien warriors missed. The crystal pillars could provide cover. The raised platform where the throne sat created a choke point. The scattered furniture could be turned into obstacles. Grabbed a heavy table and flipped it over, creating a barrier near the main entrance. When the next wave of charged in, they had to climb over the furniture, slowing them down and making them easy targets. His rifle grew hot in his hands as he fired shot after shot. They were tough. It took multiple hits to bring one down, but had learned their weak spots during previous battles. The joints in their armor, the gaps around their necks, the unprotected areas under their arms. A got close enough to swing its massive sword at its head. He ducked and drove his combat knife up under the creature's armor, finding the soft spot between chest plates. Green blood sprayed across the marble floor as the alien fell. "Behind you," shouted. Spun around to see another climbing over the furniture barrier. He grabbed a chunk of broken crystal from the floor and threw it as hard as he could. The sharp fragment hit the creature in one of its 4 eyes, and it screamed in pain and rage. But more kept coming. Was good, but he was just one human against hundreds of alien warriors. His ammunition was running low, his armor was cracked in 3 places, and his left arm bled from a sword cut. They began to change their tactics. Instead of charging straight in, they started spreading out, using the room's pillars and debris for cover just like was doing. Some of them carried ranged weapons, forcing to stay hidden more often. "They are learning," muttered, reloading his rifle with his second-to-last ammunition pack. "Is that bad?" asked. "Very bad," said. "I was counting on them being stupid." An energy blast hit the pillar was hiding behind, and chunks of marble exploded around him. He could feel the heat from the weapon washing over his face. The aliens were getting more accurate too. Looked around the throne room for anything else he could use. His eyes fell on the crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling above the main entrance. It was huge and heavy, held up by a single chain. "Majesty, when I say run, I need you to get behind the far wall," said. "What are you planning?" "Something stupid that might work." Waited until a group of 6 warriors entered the room together. They moved in formation, covering each other with their weapons. Professional soldiers, not the mindless berserkers from the first wave. Stepped out from behind his pillar and opened fire, not at the but at the chain holding the chandelier. The crystal structure groaned and swayed as his plasma bolts weakened the metal links. They saw him and immediately began firing back. Energy blasts filled the air around as he kept shooting at the chain. One bolt grazed his shoulder, spinning him around. Another burned through his armor and scorched his ribs. The chain snapped. The massive chandelier crashed down on the formation like a crystal meteor. The aliens disappeared under tons of broken glass and twisted metal. Their screams echoed off the walls for a few seconds, then stopped. "That was brilliant," said. "That was desperate," corrected, slumping against his pillar. "And now they know not to bunch up anymore." The next wave of attackers was more careful. They came in one at a time, using cover, taking their time. Had to make every shot count because he was down to his last ammunition pack. A sniper took position behind an overturned table and began shooting at its hiding spot. Each blast came closer than the last. Knew he had to move, but every direction looked like suicide. Then he heard a new sound: metal boots on marble, heavy footsteps that shook the floor with each step. Through the smoke and chaos came the biggest had ever seen. This one wore red armor instead of black, and tribal scars covered its face around its 4 glowing eyes. Whispered, the one leading their army. They stood nearly 9 feet tall and carried a sword that was bigger than its entire body. It looked around the throne room at the bodies of its dead warriors, then fixed its burning gaze on. It said something in the language that sounded like metal grinding against stone. "What did it say?" asked. "It wants to know what kind of creature you are," translated. "It says you fight like 10 warriors in one body." stepped out from behind his pillar, rifle raised. "Tell it I am human, and humans do not run." The laughed when translated. It was not a pleasant sound. Then it raised its sword and charged. Fired everything he had. 5 shots, 6, 7. Each plasma bolt hit this armor and made it glow red hot, but the massive alien kept coming. Its armor was too thick, too well made. The rifle clicked empty just as the reached him. Rolled aside as the giant sword smashed into the marble floor where he had been standing. He drew his combat knife and slashed at the alien's leg, finding a gap in the armor. Green blood flowed, but the wound only made the angrier. A backhand blow from the alien's free hand sent flying across the room. He hit a pillar hard enough to crack the crystal and fell to the floor, gasping for air. His knife skittered away across the marble. The walked toward him slowly, savoring the moment. It said something else in its harsh language. "It says you fought well for such a small creature," translated, tears running down her blue cheeks. "It will make your death quick." Struggled to his feet, using the pillar for support. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. His rifle was empty, his knife was gone, and his body felt like it had been run over by a cargo transport. But he was still standing, and he was still between thee and the Empress. "Come on then," said, raising his fists. "Let us finish this." Across the galaxy, trillions of beings watched their screens in amazement. The palace defense systems had been broadcasting everything automatically, sending the signal to news networks and military commands throughout known space. What they saw was impossible. On the bridge of a human merchant ship near the system, Captain Sarah Torres stared at her communication screen. She watched a lone human soldier fight an army of warriors to protect an alien Empress who had been abandoned by her own people. "That crazy fool," she whispered, "he is actually doing it." Her crew gathered around the screen. They were just traders, not soldiers, but they all knew what they were seeing. This was not about tactics or weapons. This was about what it meant to be human. "Captain," her navigator said quietly, "Prime is only 4 days away at maximum burn." Torres looked at her crew. They were good people, but they had never been in a real fight. Their ship had basic defensive weapons, nothing that could stand against a fleet. "Set course for Prime," she ordered, "full speed." "Captain, we cannot possibly abandon someone like that," Torres said firmly. "If a soldier can stand against an army, the least we can do is try to help him." The same scene played out on 100 different ships. Human miners, merchants, even tourists changed course toward the battle. They had no real weapons and no military training, but they had something else. They remembered what it meant to be human. On the orbital station above New Beijing, Commander Wei watched the broadcast with his staff officers. He commanded 3 squadrons of human fighter pilots, mercenaries hired to protect shipping lanes. They were good pilots, but they had never fought for anything more important than money. "Sir," one of his pilots said, "request permission to volunteer for a rescue mission." Said automatically, "We have contracts to fulfill here." "With respect, sir, some things are more important than contracts." Looked around the room. Every pilot was staring at him with the same expression. They wanted to go. They needed to go. On the screen, stood alone against impossible odds, and every human in the galaxy felt the call. "All right," said finally. "Anyone who wants to go can go, but I cannot order you to do this." Every pilot in the room volunteered. The effect was not limited to humans. On Prime itself, General Vex sat in his escape ship and watched the same broadcast. He saw fight with a courage that shamed him to his core. "Turn the ship around," he ordered his pilot. "Sir." "You heard me, turn around. We are going back to the palace." "General, that is suicide. The human is already dead. There is nothing we can do." Vex thought about his words for a long moment. For 30 years he had served the royal family. He had sworn oaths of loyalty and honor. When the moment came to prove those oaths meant something, he had run like a coward. "Maybe the human is dead," Vex said, "but his example lives on. If a human can die for our Empress, I can at least try to live for her." Behind him, other officers nodded in agreement. They had felt the shame burning inside them as they watched fight alone. Their telepathic abilities meant they could feel each other's guilt and regret like physical pain. 20 escape ships changed course and headed back toward the palace. In the throne room, faced though with nothing but his bare hands, the massive alien raised its sword for the killing blow, was bleeding, exhausted, and outweighed by 300 pounds, but he still stood between the enemy and his Empress. The sword came down like a falling star. The wall exploded inward. Human fighters screamed through the gap, their engines howling like banshees. Plasma cannons lit up the throne room as the ships opened fire on the surprised warriors. The massive aliens who had seemed unstoppable moments before scattered for cover. Through the hole in the wall came soldiers wearing human combat armor. They were not professional troops, could see merchants' patches, mining company logos, even a few civilian clothing items under their hastily assembled gear. But they fought with a fury that surprised even him. For the one who stayed, they shouted as they charged into battle. The lead fighter was a young woman with sergeant stripes on her sleeve. She saw bleeding on the floor and immediately moved to protect him, firing her rifle at any that came close. She asked. "That is me," said weakly. "Sergeant Amy Park, Terran Colonial Militia. We came as fast as we could." More humans poured through the breach. They came from a dozen different ships, wearing a dozen different uniforms. Merchant Marines fought beside corporate security guards. Miners stood back to back with transport pilots. They had nothing in common except their species and their determination. They roared in frustration as its easy victory turned into a chaotic battle. It had expected to face one broken human and a helpless alien. Instead, it found itself fighting people who seemed to multiply every time one fell down. Above the palace, fighters began attacking the ships. General Vex led the assault himself, his shame transformed into righteous anger. His people were telepaths. When one of them found courage, the others felt it too. "All units, this is General Vex," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We are taking back our world. Fight like the human taught us, never give up, never surrender." The tide of battle shifted across the entire planet. Human ships that had been fleeing or hiding suddenly turned to fight. Forces that had broken began to regroup. Even some alien species that had no connection to either side joined the fight, inspired by what they had seen on the broadcasts. In the throne room, Sergeant Park helped to his feet. Around them the battle raged on, but now they were outnumbered. "How many ships did you bring?" asked. "Every ship we could find," Park said. "Word spread fast. When humans saw what you did, they started moving. Merchants, miners, anyone with a ship and a weapon. Even some alien crews volunteered to help." Looked around the ruined throne room. Human and soldiers fought side by side against the invaders. What had started as his lone stand had become something much bigger. The found itself surrounded. For the first time in its long career of conquest, it faced enemies who would not break and run. These creatures fought with a determination that made no logical sense. "It does not understand," Empress said, moving to stand beside. "It has never faced beings who fight for ideas instead of survival." It raised its massive sword one more time, but now it faced a dozen human weapons pointing back at it. The creature that had seemed invincible minutes before suddenly looked very small and very alone. "Surrender," called out in the common galactic language. The laughed and charged anyway. It fell before taking 3 steps, struck down by energy bolts from every direction. The throne room fell silent except for the sound of distant explosions as the battle continued in other parts of the city. Looked around at the faces surrounding him. humans and aliens, who had chosen to stand together against an enemy that had seemed unbeatable. "I guess sometimes being crazy is the same as being brave," he said. 3 months after the Battle of Prime, stood in the palace gardens watching children play. Human children ran alongside young, their laughter echoing off the crystal walls that had been rebuilt after the war. The gardens were beautiful again. New flowers bloomed where weapons had burned the ground. Fountains sang with clear water instead of being stained with blood. It was hard to believe this peaceful place had seen such terrible fighting. "You look troubled," Empress said, walking up beside him. Smiled, "Not troubled, just thinking." "About what?" "About how fast things changed," said. "A few months ago, humans were just hired help in the galaxy. Second-class citizens that other species used when they needed something unpleasant done. Now look at us." He pointed to a mixed group of human and soldiers training together in the courtyard below. They moved as one unit, covering each other's weaknesses and building on each other's strengths. The war had lasted only 3 more weeks after the battle at the palace. Once they realized they faced an enemy that would not break, their own morale began to crumble. The alien species that had seemed unstoppable when facing frightened refugees found themselves helpless against determined resistance. Human volunteers had poured in from across the galaxy. They brought with them something the other species had forgotten: the willingness to fight for strangers, for ideas, for causes bigger than themselves. "The humans did not win this war alone," reminded him. "Your people inspired the rest of us to remember our own courage." That was true. Once they saw that bravery was a choice rather than an instinct, they had fought with skill and determination that surprised even themselves. Other alien species had joined the alliance, each bringing their own strengths to the fight. But it had been human stubbornness that started it all, the refusal to give up when giving up made perfect sense. "The Galactic Council wants to offer you a position," said. "Supreme Military Advisor for Allied Forces. You would help train integrated units across a dozen different worlds." Had been expecting this conversation. His actions at the palace had made him famous across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to know the human who had stood alone against an army and lived to tell about it. "I already have a job," said. "I serve the Empress of. This is bigger than just protecting me. You could help shape the future of galactic defense. Think of the good you could do." Was quiet for a long moment, watching the children play. "Do you remember what you told me when you first hired me? You said you needed someone who understood real loyalty, not just following orders." "I remember." "Well, loyalty means finishing what you start. I swore to protect you, and that oath does not have an expiration date." Smiled. "Then perhaps we can find a way to do both. I have been thinking about establishing a new military academy here on Prime, a place where humans and aliens can train together, learning from each other's strengths." "You want me to be a teacher?" "I want you to teach them what you taught me. That courage is not about being unafraid. It is about choosing to act despite your fear." The idea appealed too. He had spent his whole life as a soldier, but maybe it was time to help create better soldiers. Not just fighters, but people who understood what they were fighting for. "There is something else," said. "The High Command has requested a meeting. They want to negotiate a peace treaty." Raised an eyebrow. "They want peace. The same species that has been eating worlds for 50 years. Apparently, our victory changed their thinking. They built their entire culture around the idea that strength equals worth. When they met humans who fought beyond all reason, it challenged everything they believed." "So what happens now?" "Now we try to turn enemies into allies," said. "It will not be easy. There is too much hatred, too many dead on both sides, but maybe we can build something better than endless war." A month later, the first class of cadets arrived at the new military academy. They came from 20 different species and twice as many worlds. Some were veterans of the recent war, Others were young civilians who wanted to serve a cause greater than themselves. Stood in front of them in the academy's main lecture hall. The cadets sat in neat rows, eager to learn from the human who had become a legend, but was not interested in teaching them about legends. "Everyone thinks this academy is about military tactics," he began. "How to shoot, how to move faster, how to win battles. That is all important, but it is not why you are here." He walked among the rows of seats, looking each cadet in the eye. Humans, even a few reformed warriors who had chosen to join the Alliance. "You are here to learn what it means to serve something bigger than yourself. To understand that real strength comes not from weapons or armor, but from the choice to stand when others run." A young human cadet raised her hand. "Sir, how do we know when a cause is worth fighting for?" "Good question," Cadet Torres said. He had memorized all their names on the first day. "Anyone can fight for money or glory or revenge. Those are easy motivations. The hard part is fighting for people you have never met, for ideas you cannot touch, for a future you might not live to see." A cadet spoke up. "But how do we overcome our natural instincts? When fear takes hold, how do we choose courage?" Thought about his own moment of choice in the throne room, when all the rational reason said to run, when survival instinct screamed for retreat. What had made him stay? "Fear is not the enemy," he said finally. "Fear keeps you alive. The enemy is letting fear make all your choices for you. Courage is not about not being afraid. Courage is about being afraid and doing your duty anyway." An older warrior, one who bore scars from a dozen battles, raised a clawed hand. "In my culture, we were taught that only the strong deserve to survive. You humans proved us wrong. What makes you different?" Smiled. "Nothing makes us different. Every species in this room has the same capacity for courage and loyalty and sacrifice. We just choose to use it." The lecture went on for 2 hours, talked about honor and duty, about the difference between following orders and following conscience. But mostly, he talked about choice. As the cadets filed out, remained behind with Empress. They stood together in the empty lecture hall, looking out through the crystal windows at the rebuilt city beyond. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. "This idea of turning former enemies into allies." "Probably not," said honestly. "There will be setbacks, betrayals, mistakes. Some people are too committed to hatred to change." "Then why do it?" Watched a group of mixed species cadets walking together across the academy courtyard. They talked and laughed like old friends, despite coming from worlds that had been at war just months before. "Because sometimes the impossible just takes a little longer," he said. "And because someone needs to be willing to try, even when the odds are terrible." Nodded. "What do you think makes humans special in this galaxy?" He thought about the question for a long moment, remembering all the battles and sacrifices that had brought them to this point. "Nothing makes us special," he said finally. "We just choose to act like we are, and sometimes that is enough to make it true."